Welcome to Techstination. Joining us is Benji Rogers, co-founder of NewsHero. Thanks for joining us, Benji.
Thank you for having me. Much appreciated.
Well, tell us what NewsHero is.
Sure. So when I became a father, I became conscious of the fact that I was listening to, and reading a lot of news. And when my daughter hit 5 years old, I noticed that the news, as it was kind of coming to her, felt very salacious in certain ways. The titling of articles was designed to kind of grab you. And she started to ask questions that were very difficult to answer. And so basically the concept behind NewsHero was, could we find a way to look for the heroes in every story versus those who would do harm? Most of the news articles that I would listen to, say on a podcast, would begin with 17 killed in a shooting at boom with boom. And they would focus on the number of dead, the shooter, and the kind of the goriness of it all, as opposed to the people who jumped in to help, who came to their defense, who helped to save them. And it was really sort of encapsulated by a quote from Fred Rogers, who said, when I talk to parents about how to talk to their kids about tragedy, I tell them to look for the helpers. You'll always find people to help. And so the concept for NewsHero was really born out of this idea that I would love for my daughter to listen to all of the news, good or bad, but I don't want her to think that the world is in fact worse than it is. And I want her to know that, in 2019, if she is in trouble, there's a safety net around her, unlike any that has ever existed in human history. So the concept was, could we tell the same stories, but from this angle of those who helped over those who harmed? Could we avoid clickbait headlines and still find an audience? And that's what we're going to try and see if we can make happen.
And you're on Kickstarter with a campaign to back this now, and you're planning to launch this fall?
Yeah, so the reason that we chose Kickstarter was because I've done venture fundraising before, and what I wanted to do was figure out if people actually wanted this kind of news. So rather than go to a VC and raise a lot of money to figure out if they wanted it, why not just offer it to them in advance, and we can help them, and they will sort of learn about the process of the company as it goes, as it comes into being. So it was a decision that was made to sort of test demand, as well as to involve people in the creation of the company, which I think is always going to start from a solid foundation.
Well, tell us how this is going to work, how you envision gathering news and delivering it.
Yeah, so the analogy I like to use is, if you think about Uber wouldn't exist without the GPS satellites. So all over the world, you can build apps that will talk to these satellites. And so the application on top is fairly light. We think of sort of the news gathering process in a similar fashion. There's amazing journalists out there gathering news all day long. And when they go to file their reports or publish them, whether that be from Reuters, AP, New York Times, Fox, whatever your flavor is, because the advertising model demands, and if it bleeds, it leads clickbait headline, the stories begin in the way I just described, with the harm, the agony, the suffering, the danger first. So what we're going to do is take those stories, the facts within them, using machines and humans, and basically write our versions of them, but starting with the hero first. We're going to quote where we use actual direct quotes from the sources, and then we're going to remunerate through a prorated system of how many sources we use, all of the sources that the news came from. So if you imagine, Uber paying for the satellites that they use, we would be paying the journalists and the creators throughout the process of news gathering and making. So we will have a newsroom, an editorial, an editor-in-chief, writers, and machine learning algorithms as well. But the goal is to effectively build a sort of a journalistic ecosystem that direct links out to the sources that we've taken from, so that you can always know where that source came from, and we can give those journalists photographers, editors, etc., credit and, more importantly, money.
So the journalists are paid by readers, subscribers?
Yes, yes. So it's an interesting one. So what we're trying what we were calling a direct support model. What frustrated me about the news of recent times was that I don't like ads, so I use ad blockers, and it's because I don't want to be tracked, and there's a whole series of reasons. I also don't know that I could subscribe, meaningfully to all the news sources that I want. Like I don't want certain sections of it. So the news industry has kind of forced consumers into one of two paths. You're either an ad, you have to experience these ads, or you have to subscribe. And some you can't even subscribe to, which is sort of crazy to me. So we're taking this middle ground with the technology that we've been building. And what that technology does is it says if I give $1, for example, to the article in a direct support, we split a percentage to the platform, to NewsHero, and the payment system that undergirds it. Let's say, a percentage to the journalist that wrote the article and gathered from all the sources. And then we prorate a percentage to all of the sources that whose work we've basically referenced and linked out to.
And you talk on the site on Kickstarter about reputable reporting,
Yeah.
and stories. How do you define that in this current climate?
We're actually in the process of defining that. And one of the things that's interesting is if you take a piece from Fox, which would say, is sort of fairly conservative leaning, and you would take a piece from the New York Times, which is arguably left leaning, the facts tend to be the same. They will slant the reporting to basically service a potential need or audience, but the facts remain consistent. So the goal would be that there will be a minimum of 3, but between 5 and 7 sources that go into any given article. We published an example yesterday on the Gilroy, California shooting, and in that we referenced Fox, the AP, LA Times, New York Times, CNN, PBS, Associated Press, and that was it. So if you were to read that one article, you would be reading the sum total of all of the news gathering of those organizations. The difference being that instead of the headlines beginning with, Gilroy Garlic Shooter Festival, shooter identified, name is, or official name of shooter who killed 3, or 3 dead in, or, on and on, our story began with rapid response by police saves lives in Gilroy. Because what we found out from looking deeper into these articles was that because there was such a heavy police presence, they responded in under a minute and saved lives. And it looks like the organizers of the festival were really on it and were shepherding people to safety. But that was the last part of most of the articles that we came across. So, trusted and reputable sources would be sources that the existing news sources gather from, but also a wide selection, we think, that would cover hopefully a right-leaning spectrum, a left-leaning spectrum, and a centrist-leaning spectrum to get to somewhere in the middle.
And so you'll have journalists aggregating from various sources or doing original reporting? Yeah. How is this going to work?
Both. So basically, the goal of the platform is that we will start it with a sort of a general newsletter that you would get, and if you go onto the site, you would catch, kind of like if you were to go to a Google News, you would see what is happening in the world on the sort of the front page, and it would be tuned to you by location and other things along those lines. But we also want to open the platform up for original reporting. The caveat being that we would avoid the clickbait style headlines and anything that was basically trying to slant the news towards the more salacious, if it bleeds, it leads type of headlines. You can get those anywhere. I mean, literally everywhere. And when we looked through, for example, this story in Gilroy, the tragedy in Gilroy, what was so incredible was there were pages of publications all discussing 3 dead, 15 injured, 3 dead, 15 injured, and talking about this poor little boy who was killed. But really, what was so phenomenal to me was that the police did their job. the safety net existed, it was all helpful. And so we do talk about, you know, the deceased, we talk about the victims, we talk about the gunman, but would never mention the gunman's name, because I don't think that that's what the gunman would want. But the goal is to have one place where you could go to get the combination of facts from all these sources, knowing that you are remunerating all of those sources by paying for a single newsletter. And you would also be supporting both original journalism and this more sort of aggregated version too.
So where can people go to get more information and perhaps to back NewsHero?
Sure. If you go to newshero.io, newshero, all one word, .io, or you can look for us on Kickstarter.
Very interesting. Benji Rogers, thank you for taking the time with us.
Thank you very much.
Now this. Innovation. Hi, I'm Fred Fishkin, and I've been covering consumer technology for a long time, and it takes a lot to impress me. That's why I'm excited to tell you about the latest way to enjoy cooking in the great outdoors from my friend Patrick Sherwin and his great team at GoSun Stove. What if you could harness the sun to cook your meals anywhere you go, day or night? The GoSun Fusion arrives this summer using the company's tried and true reflectors and a solar vacuum tube to get you cooking without the mess of charcoal, heavy propane tanks, or smoke. And with an optional solar panel and battery storage, and the ability to plug in at home or on the road, you really can use the GoSun Fusion to cook anytime and anywhere. Want to learn more? Head to gosun.co and use the code TEXTINATION to save 10%. That's gosun.co.